Um, we're really glad to have the Beavertails team with us today, and luckily for you, if you've just eaten lunch, well, now's the perfect time because we're going to be talking about this. So, Ella, if you just want to give like a little background context about the speakers, you can go ahead.
All right, can everybody hear me?
Yes, it works.
Okay, so we're proud to present two entrepreneurs who will be speaking in our third speaker session. Pino Gioia and the CEO of Beavertails Canada, and Tina Serrero. I apologize if I mispronounced your last names. The creative director of Beavertails Canada. They will be speaking to us about lessons they have learned about branding and management. Pino originally started as a regular summer worker while pursuing his MBA. He progressed through the management ranks of Beavertails Canada. He eventually became the chain's first franchisee and then first area developer before being named CEO. After several years, he purchased the majority of his chain with his twin brother Anthony and his wife Tina. The chain of over 160 stores operates coast to coast as well as in the US, France, and Mexico, and the United Arab Emirates. Pino and his wife enjoy testing new indulgent beaver tail flavors with their daughter and two sons. Tina, what was once a summer side hangout and way to spend time with her boyfriend, into endless possibilities. Beavertails opened a window for Tina to turn her passion for retail, design, and creativity into a career as the creative director of Beavertails Canada. Today, with 160 stores across Canada and internationally, she proudly works side by side with her husband, Pino, their three awesome kids, and brother-in-law, Anthony Dioia. And now we'll hear their presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Ella. You actually did pretty well with the last names overall, so it's actually very impressive. So how about we'll show that video maybe first, if that's okay?
Yeah, it's perfect.
All right. So 1 second. All righty, here we go.
Hey neighbor. Yeah, you. We're the guys who live above you. No, not the noisy tenant from upstairs. We're Beavertails Pastries, your friends from Canada, eh? You know Canada, right? It's the home of maple syrup, moose, lumberjacks, and the Mounties. Oh, it's also the home of Beavertails Pastries, not an actual tail of a beaver. We're talking about the sweet, fluffy, tasty delicacy that simply looks like a real beaver's tail and is exactly what your life has been missing. Like your traditions, Beavertails pastries are truly one of a kind, a uniquely delicious pastry reserved for those special moments that make lifelong memories. It all started 40 years ago, back when disco was at war with punk and before we lived our lives through a phone screen. Our founders, Grant and Pam, started this thing in a kitchen nestled somewhere in our nation's capital. Fast forward to 2009, and a dynamic trio of forward thinkers migrated the head lodge to Montreal and brought fresh ideas and new leadership to the brand. So what exactly is a Beavertails pastry? Well, they're made on the spot using whole wheat dough. We lightly cook both sides of the tail and then top it off with any of our 9 popular flavors. There's something for everyone. We're talking cinnamon and sugar, chocolate, hazelnut, maple spread, and the list goes on. And why stop there? We've also got fresh, homemade creamy ice cream, frosty smoothies, our juicy beaver dog, and Canada's famous poutine cheese curd fries. If you're feeling extra adventurous, like a lumberjack at the beach, you can even ask for it served directly onto your piping hot Beavertails pastry. See, that's the thing about us. We know that you're tired of all the generic fried dough options. No thank you. There's nothing exciting about those stale ideas with low-grade ingredients. We stand out because we pride ourselves on serving you only the good stuff. Our customers love us, and we've got the buzz to prove it. We've been pleasing crowds since 1978, and our fan base continues to grow as we open up stores and expand our reach across the globe. We have shops at major attractions like Six Flags, Cedar Fair, Hershend Family Entertainment, Granby Zoo, Toronto Zoo, and many more. Our lineups sometimes rival that of the rides, but we guarantee it's worth the wait. Like Canada's lakes and mountains, our locations come in all shapes and sizes. We have full stores, walk-up counters, portable hip containers, or even Beavertails trailers or trucks. There's no space or location that we can't figure out a solution for. How very beaver of us. We can't blame the fans for raving about Beavertails pastries. Beaver is better. End of story.
That came through?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yes, it worked.
Great.
I was just wondering, Mr. Ayoya, was that voice yours?
No, it's actually, it ended up being a friend of ours by total coincidence,
Yeah.
but
No.
the agency, we
Okay.
didn't know that we needed this time, but no, not my voice.
Okay, great.
Excellent. So
Why don't you start?
you can tell we coordinated this, but we're married, so we're gonna wing this.
Right.
I mentioned just in the pre-comments that my wife and I are very fortunate to be invited to do things like this. Not often, but often enough. So we kind of try and guess what the audience will want to hear and what humble advice or comments we can give you guys. And the reality is that we were your age, literally, when we started this. Usually we're talking to university kids and it's a little bit older, but I started off as an employee in college when we started dating. And so the reality is parallel in a funny way. It's not frequent that your average summer job or college job is something that's going to continue into your the rest of your career, but that's kind of what happened with us. And I think that one of the lessons that we think back to when we first started off is such an obvious one. It's such a cliche one, but it's so true. And that is that if you don't ask, you don't get. Mm-hmm. And when we first started off as employees, we were literally just employees. It was summer job at La Ronde.
Cooking, cleaning, mopping the floors.
Doing all the fun stuff in any restaurant job. And then when I'm a year older than Tina, so when I graduated my undergrad in university, I had no idea what I wanted to do for a living, which is also a common thing for students then and now.
And forever.
And forever will be, right? And so on a whim, I took the train down to Ottawa and talked to the guys who own the company, the couple that own the company that you saw a cartoon of in the video. And I said to them, hey, have you ever thought of selling a store as a franchise? And as it turns out, their lawyer had told them at the time that, what would really be great is if you sold your first franchise to a bunch of students, because you could then show that if a student could do it, anybody could do it. And so with $10,000 down, which was more money then than it was now, but it's still very little money, they financed us to buy the first store. It was financed 100% at 0 or 90% at zero interest. And life changed for us. We literally, all of a sudden, here we were still in university and we owned the stores at La Ronde.
Which is crazy because it was like the perfect job, right? La Ronde was at that time summer only. And we went to school from September to May and worked from May until September.
Yeah.
And so it kind of was serendipitous in a strange way.
Yeah. And so as you guys embark on your careers, I think, we've had the pleasure of having hundreds or thousands of employees at our stores and at the office. And different people take summer jobs in different ways, but we always tell that story to remind or inspire or encourage in some way that you never know where you're starting and you never know where that's going to take you. But if you're engaged and curious by it, then it's amazing where that can take you. And so that's one point I wanted to make. And then the other point, I just said the magic word. People often say, what are the key values you live by? Newsflash. Business is crazy and we got 3 kids and life is crazy and nobody has time to think of values to live by. But if you really forced us to choose, what are the key words that you live by and the key lessons in life that you've learned, being curious for me remains by far and away one of the most important things in my life, maybe the most important thing. And it's what we strive to teach our 3 children. It's always being curious, always asking the why, always delving a little bit further. And over the years, Tina and I have come across books and seminars and webinars and conference presentations where it's amazing that curiosity is also linked to happiness and to life fulfillment. And sadly, I hope there's not too many faculty online, but it's not always linked to academics, right? The pure pursuit of academics is about curiosity, and I think we've lost our way over the years, and now academics is about studying so you get the right answers so that you do better on the LSATs. That curiosity, keep it. Take the classes that you're curious about, take the classes you're actually learning something about, and it's more worthwhile.
It's funny how school has become how school is the theoretical curiosity of life. And there's a balance there, and everybody needs that balance. But I think both of us are not necessarily, we were not academic excellers. No. And so
we didn't go to Marianopolis.
We didn't get kicked out of anywhere, and we weren't troublemakers. But we really did, like, we strove to break the paradigms of everything that people put in front of us. And our parents said, like, why are you doing this? Like, you're educated. You like, why do you need to be like mopping and this? And we said, we love this. This is great. And you know, how long has it been? Too long. I'm 12. I'm 12, yeah. And I think it's been like 25 years.
No, longer than that.
I really am 12.
32 years.
It's a long time. It's a long time.
And just for context, guys, when we bought the company, there were 2 stores at Laurent and 3 in Ottawa, and it was nowhere near the thing it is now. Like, nobody would have predicted that Barack Obama would have had a Beavertail when he came to Canada. Well, things have evolved a bit since then. We've opened a lot of stores, and in the franchise industry, you when you're talking to colleagues, you often say a company is big not only by knowing how many stores they've opened, but by knowing how many they've closed. Because all the franchises go through it, and you have to close stores. It's part of growing. And so when we were brought on with my twin brother to restructure the company, so after we bought this first store at Laurent, we ended up slowly just opening stores in the province of Quebec, focusing here. And the head office in Ottawa kind of went randomly across Canada, a little bit in the States, 2 stores, and a little bit internationally. And it didn't work. And at that point, we learned another good lesson. So these are lessons in our history that I'm randomly inserting into the presentation. But we have a little list here, so it's not fair. But another lesson we learned there is that relationships matter and friendships matter. And so when we were running the Quebec operations, the founder and his wife, the couple in Ottawa, and their management team in Ottawa almost went bankrupt. And it's rare, and we don't have to, unless there's accounting majors on the call, we don't have to get into the details, but they owed us a large amount of money. So this was 2000, and they owed us about $250,000. It was not a small amount of money. And it's rare for a franchisee to be owned by the head office, but that's where we were.
Yeah, we were just supporting our franchisees here from a promotion and marketing standpoint. So we were, at the time, I forget how many stores, we were about 22 stores, but we had the most successful, most profitable region, and we were supporting it as if we were the head office. So it was interesting. The hazelnut chocolate, apple, and I'm missing one that you created. It came from us. Didn't come from our head office.
Maybe half the flavors were created in Montreal at the time. Yeah. Montreal's always been a good supporter of Beavertails. But in that trajectory, when we were asked to step in and help the head office, technically the company was bankrupt, and technically they owed us $250,000. And technically we were asked to do this for free. We actually got virtually zero salary. It worked out to lower than minimum wage in today's money. So it was really little money then. And we did it. We did it because these were folks that we liked, and folks that we supported, and folks that had given us the opportunity to own our stores. And so it's one of those lessons that, again, I'm not hating on colleges or universities, but those are the simple lessons that your parents might share with you guys, but I don't think we teach enough about it in schools. What value is a relationship? What value is it? Like, you might have read very inspirationally yesterday, the day before, a vice president of Amazon resigned because of the way they were treating employees at some picking facilities in the US. And that vice president was Canadian, based in Vancouver, so we have good integrity to be proud of here. But you don't see that very often. And that's values matter, and friendships matter, and relationships matter. And you don't have to be old to think that. So that was what we learned. And so we did it for free. And this is not a lesson you can count on, but when you do good things, karma is out there, and it comes back to usually pay you. Again, I don't want to take liability for anything here, but after 5 or 6 years of doing that, we ended up having share options in the company that actually became worth more than the company. And that's how we ended up buying it. It was a friendly buyout, but that's how we ended up buying the companies. So when we first stepped in to clean it up, it was
a labor of love.
Yeah, almost like we felt obligated, but it was the right thing to do. But then little did we know that, hey, look now.
I think there's something in business that you learn, and you'll meet a lot of people along the way, and you'll see this, from people already in business. And there are many styles of business owners. Some are very aggressive. Some are very single-minded towards themselves. Some really are do-gooders and they want to give back to the community. But the one thing that I've always said as a manager, an employee, an employer, when I talk to any of my employees is hold your head up high and know that you can sleep well at night. And that if you're too aggressive and too single-minded, then the only person who wins is you. And so if you don't treat your employees that way and you don't treat your business that way, then it's kind of sad, but then you might end up sleeping alone at night. And so at the end of the day, it really is there's a bigger play out there. And so I don't think we've had very many employees that we've ever walked away from and said, wouldn't talk to them, wouldn't give them a reference, wouldn't help them. We've helped so many former employees who come to us and said, listen, I've outgrown my time here, or I feel like this is not the right space for me. And we've actually helped them get other jobs, introduce them to other people. It's kind of like the strange philanthropy of within, and it's all about not being sort of single-mindedness in life and work. And I think that's a huge lesson that we've learned in terms of how we conduct business on a daily basis.
Ella, or Elspeth as well. Before we started, we had mentioned that we really encourage people to ask questions. So I don't think we didn't mention that. But if any of the team wants to ask questions, please.
Do you see your comments? Can you pull up your comments? Because hang on.
No, I have no flags. So.
Okay, there we go.
One. So you were talking about the value of relationships and how this isn't taught enough in school. Do you have any ideas or any suggestions for how schools can integrate it more into the existing curriculum?
Sure. An obvious one that I think is, it's never fast enough, but it's coming more and more, is getting students to work in teams, and not just on projects, but to do team collaborative learning in a school setting. I think it's too easy to think pure silos. So you leave accounting class and, okay, now we go to marketing class and then we go to English. But really, why can't we do a proper accounting memo written in communicatively expressive English? And having multidisciplinary teams forces you to realize that, okay, so it's not just my mark in accounting. I have this relationship with 4 other people, and we have to work together to achieve that.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I also think there's an interesting thing that, especially for the past few years, that I've come to realize as an employer, is that we're often in groups in school. We kind of pit each other, pitted against each other. This person isn't holding up their side, and this person isn't doing that, and I'm carrying all the workload. And you know what? Business in an office is like that too, right? Where you get really agitated from people, and it's more about learning how to actually communicate and say, hey, listen, is there a problem? Can we help you? How do we get this done together? And I think that there's a whole clear and kind aspect that we don't teach our students at school, and say, what is it we're after? How can we collectively get this done? And people we don't teach that.
It's too bad.
Yeah.
So true. Like the schools overlook it. Like you said, we do have team projects, but that's basically the extent of collaborative learning.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, this is a whole other topic, but I think that the poor schools are stuck in a metrics race where your cohort of students has to perform at a certain level for the school to maintain its standing and for all of you to get into the next school.
Yeah.
And that, you know what, that's a lot like the stock market in larger companies. You're so focused on the short-term objectives that it's so easy to forget what the long-term objectives are. And we don't invest large amounts of money, but when we invest, or especially when we invest in new projects on the Beavertails side, we have a very long view of what the project is. It's not, let's release this so we could make money this summer. It's let's look at how this helps us in the marketplace.
Somebody was asking us before when we went live, what have we been doing work-wise with this time in quarantine? And we said we're doing a lot of strategic thinking that we don't normally get to do on a day-to-day basis. It's kind of like a forced pause. And it's helpful. And I think a lot of business is not necessarily long-term. And I think what we pride ourselves on in all of our projects is the storytelling behind the business and what that focus is. And usually when you're telling a story, it's long. And it can have an end, or it maybe doesn't have an end, but our story doesn't have an end. Our story is a path. And so I think that a lot of people say, okay, so my story is to sell out for $1 million. But if you chose to do it as much because it's something you love, and that's a huge thing, I think, if we talk about, what have we learned along the way, is don't do anything that you don't love. And so that's your story, right? Like it becomes like if you absolutely, I don't necessarily, but if you absolutely loved accounting and that was your story, then you wake up every morning feeling good about that. And if you don't, then that's not your story.
Or the day you don't,
yeah,
it's time to change your story. It's
right.
okay to change your story.
Or to evolve it or adapt it and to think creatively about it. And that's so, so important.
Yeah, and I think your generation has a good handle on that, where and it's not just you guys, but like in the last 15, 20 years, there's been a shift where when people no longer want to be doing what they're doing, they change.
Yeah.
And that's fine. We encourage it. We've had employees, one guy who did a marketing degree and worked for us for a number of years, ended up saying, one day he came in and he still remains a very good friend of ours. He says, you know what, I actually want to be an engineer. And he went back into engineering, which is completely other world.
Yeah.
And good for him. He still works now in sales and marketing, but for an engineering outfit. So he kind of married both passions. Elspeth, I think you say you have a question. Is that what I'm seeing?
Yeah, I think Zexi also has one, but I'll just quickly say mine. Before you owned the company, when you just had maybe the initial few franchises, what was the most difficult part of owning and managing them?
I have one answer.
I have one to go.
Oh, you go first. Okay.
It's funny. I feel like because we were like 17 and 18 years old, it was sometimes difficult to get the buy-in of our employees because they were our peer group.
Yeah.
And it was really hard. And so, you got money on the line or your job is on the line. And you're really trying to work towards that goal, that story that you're trying to tell. And not everybody necessarily is on that page, and they think, well, you're as young as I am, and I have a party to go to, and why do I have to work that shift?
Yeah.
So we did a lot of sacrificing, and that was interesting. Those were interesting times.
I imagine, like, we have friends in the .com sector, and there's similarities there where the driven, stereotypical bootstrap founder is working with peers his own age who are not unmotivated, but also are not interested in being there 110 hours a week.
Yeah.
And the bootstrap founder is going to do 110 hours a week.
No matter what.
No matter where he or she is. Even if they're working for another startup, they will be there 110 hours a week. that's just that person. We are that person, but we know people like that, and it is what it is. But I've heard similar challenges to what Tina said, in that they go to work and they don't understand how people can't relate and engage with the intensity that they have. So that, yeah, I agree that's a good one. And I think for me, the challenge was when we were starting off, again, the brand was nowhere near what it is now.
Nobody knew what it was.
No, yeah, nobody, it was very unknown in Quebec. We were giving out, literally the first few years, we gave away more samples than we sold product for. But the challenge that we had was, and this is, I'm sure your parents have all said similar things to you guys, because we had never been in business, we kept hitting our head against the wall at different levels, and we never understood, okay, is this like a new problem? Or are we being stupid? Or is this a problem everybody's been through? And then years later, we would talk to our banks or our lawyers, and invariably they'd say, oh, you've been through that. Yeah, everybody goes through that. And it's like, wow, where were you 2 years ago?
Yeah,
we were having an existential crisis about that. But so the solution to that is, and it's a double-edged sword, but is you go work for a big company for a few years before you start your business.
You learn.
But you don't learn. There's nothing like learning at the front trenches of this crazy war we're in. So it's a trade-off.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much for your answer. I think Stephen has a question. I think it's in chat.
Question from how has COVID-19 affected your operations? Well, we're closed.
Yes,
It's
not really
greatly.
affected. Yeah.
So we closed most of our stores. So our stores are all franchises, and we don't own and operate any of our own stores at the moment. And so one by one, our franchisees, with our guidance, decided to close. We could be open. We could have been open. Where food is an essential service, and technically, most of our stores are counter. A lot of them are counter and walk up. They're in locations, though, that are high tourist and leisure locations, so those are not popular right now or closed.
Yeah. Or illegal to get to.
Right. And so we kind of encourage them, for the safety of themselves and their staff who are taking like public transportation, to take a pause. And it wasn't our biggest season. It is not our biggest season in spring, so it was not as terrible as could have been.
Yeah, mid-June it'll really start to hurt.
Yeah, but one by one, they are starting to reopen with proper protocol and presentation and safety measures put into place. We're opening. It's a kind of a strategic shift, or temporary, hopefully strategic shift. Our food trucks and our mobile operators are the ones that are actually starting to open first. And normally we do festivals and events with those trucks, and corporate catering and all kinds of those kind of events. But now we're doing something, this is talking about being like what you learn, how to be nimble and how to shift. Some of our trailers are opening up on the parking lots of Loblaws or IGA or their local fire station, the community center, just where people are walking around, and actually making people super happy because they're a treat in this world of chaos. And so one by one, we're getting there, and we won't make the year the same as we did last year based on that kind of business, but it shows a way to evolve and change and to adapt to this situation without putting people at risk, and still managing to make our clients really happy.
And Tina raises a good point that I think she should go on a little bit more just from a marketing perspective for you guys. Oftentimes when, especially on the marketing side, your professors will tell you, you need to solve a problem. That's kind of...
it's a real life.
Yeah, real life, or it's the formulaic approach to marketing. From a storytelling perspective, we call that North Starring. So what do we really stand for? Our personal belief, this is not going to be true if you own an engineering company, but most problems you solve will be emotional. Again, if you're building a bridge, I'd like to know there's more than emotion being put into it. But generally speaking, more often than not, you're solving an emotional problem. For Beavertails, we absolutely are not building any bridges. we are contributing an emotional solution. So maybe talk about the North Star work you guys do.
So we call it North Star. Everybody calls it something different, but North Star is like, what is our guiding force? What's our principle that we're working towards? And North Star comes across in everything. And so it's interesting from a marketing and creative standpoint what that means for us. A lot of companies are product driven, and I think we had our stage of being product driven too. But our North Star really means that we make a lot of people happy by what we present. So our food is, a little bit over the top. It's more than a donut. And so what comes across for us is that we're always trying to guide you towards what our product is. What is our story? Where we are, you have a beaver tail. You always have a beaver tail when you're with friends and family. And it's out when you're enjoying. You take people from out of town to Beavertails. All of that's kind of been turned on its head right now. There's no friends and family, there's family or people that you're living with that you can go out with, but it's very limited. And so we by setting up, it's funny about this evolution and setting up in people's sort of neighborhoods now with a truck, which we would never do before, is that we're actually bringing that little treat, that indulgence, that moment of pure pleasure, and still allowing you to make memories in this time. And what I'm amazed about when I talk and I look at my our feed for Beavertails and all the people who are reposting from the few trucks and mobiles that are actually out on the road, it's unbelievable. And my marketing director and I were on the phone the other day, and we're saying the UCG, the customer stuff that they're posting is fabulous. It just shows how we have this incredible connection to our client and how we do make them happy, and that we are this like little light at the end of their tunnel. And so all of a sudden we have, 5 or 6 trucks are open, and the feed on Instagram is phenomenal. So it tells us that we are actually, the North Star is working. And so, so is that what you were
times of crisis is always a good time to test your North Star.
Yeah.
If the news is good, you'll be very elated. If the news is bad, you're about to know it fairly quickly.
I'm looking at the
I think Lexi Zexi, I think you had a question, right? We missed right over you.
Yeah, that's right.
Sorry about that.
So no worries about that. So just a side question, but you were talking about like having trucks during like pandemic situation, which is quite interesting, because often like the other companies would opt for like delivery options. Are you guys planning to do that anytime soon?
Oh, okay. I saw that question from Ella as well. So we actually do have that with a number of our stores. The problem is that, as you guys might know, a lot of Beavertail stores are located in places like La Ronde, the amusement park, or Granby Zoo, or even Mont Tremblant. And Tremblant, an Uber driver could go and pick something up from the store, but Uber doesn't actually service the Tremblant area. So 80% easily of our footprint kind of falls outside of third-party deliveries, one way or another.
Okay, and so you said you're usually open in like attraction areas. Are you planning to open up any Beavertail soon, like in the Montreal region in particular? Because I think I'm not the only one who would like to like taste those Beavertails without going to like attraction parks, right?
Interesting story for you guys. And these are the kinds of stories that I know people learn better through stories, but this is the kind of thing I wish schools did more of. But anyway, I'm sorry. I'm trying to be positive on that. But there's a great story we came across years ago about a young girl, this was maybe 80 years ago, whose father was selling ice cream equipment. Whose father made ice cream. And he brought home a batch of ice cream one morning or one afternoon, and the machine was broken and the ice cream was soft. And the daughter tried it and said, "This is the best ice cream I've ever tried, Dad. You have to make ice cream like this all the time." And so they got to work breaking the machine. They had to make a machine that didn't work as well as it should work so that the ice cream would stay soft. And that company was Dairy Queen. That's how Dairy Queen started way back then. And when Dairy Queen started, it was a total novelty food, which sometimes sounds kitschy or tacky, old school. It was the kind of thing you would see at your state fair. And then after a generation or two, it became more common, and you would start to see it not just at state fairs, but at a few locations like the old school Dairy Queens that you would drive to with the big parking lots. And then it became, another generation or two, and it became more and more known, and then it became ubiquitous to the point that now every shopping center has a Dairy Queen. And so in a funny way, Beavertails has gone through that same trajectory where I remember that, that first summer at Laurent, where easily 90% of the clients are like, ooh, I don't want to have that. Like, is that a real Beavertail? And you had to explain it, and you had to explain it with samples, and it was so long and so complicated to get people to try it and then to explain there's different flavors. We often tell our international franchises, say, how do we explain what a Beavertail is and how do we introduce it into our markets? And we have to remind them that there's two challenges with doing Beavertails. One is that you have to explain that, of course, we're the market leader in this segment of pastries.
Yeah.
But the second one, which is much harder, is that you have to explain that we're the market leaders of a thing. And what is this thing? It's not like saying I'm going to bring Five Guys burgers to Canada. Everybody knows what a burger is. I'm just going to tell you why my burger is better, or why my sushi is better, or why my vegetarian food is better, whatever. But for us, it's first we have to explain that we are this thing that is not a crepe, and it's not a donut, and it's not so many other things. It's something unto itself. And then we have to say, and by the way, we're like the leading group in the world to do this kind of recipe. It's long, but it's a lot more rewarding when you get there.
I see.
Educating a market is really tough.
Yeah.
And I keep saying now, like every time we come out with a new product, we need to stop educating. It was really hard. It was a long road. And it's true. Nobody knew what a Beavertail was. And now if we say Beavertails, people always say, oh my God, my favorite is, and that's amazing. But every time, we try and do something, and there's a lot of boredom, right? When you're creating, like you assume people know, you're like excited, you have all this time, you're the person who thinks about it. It's like when you have a party, and you host a huge party, and you have all of these details, but one of the details doesn't work out, you're really one of the only people who knows the detail that didn't work out because you were the party planner. You're so vested. And it's the same thing on the business side, where you're so vested, you overwork, overthink, overwrite, do everything. But the client is just the client. And the client, we always seem to, that's one of the things too that we always, was on my list, is don't underestimate your client. Your client knows a lot. They may not necessarily be thinking the way you think, but don't overthink it because they're probably right there with you. And so creating products that you have to educate can lead long run to an amazing thing, especially in technology and coming up with something completely new. But it is a labor of love.
Yeah. And an interesting, another story for you guys to consider if you're in any way entrepreneurially minded or just curious. I read a great article that I'm sure you can Google and find, where they talked about the challenges that the Segway had, the two-wheel buggies there, and they compared it to skateboards. And they said, very interestingly, skateboard adoption in California was huge and quick because every Californian teen could understand that this was a surfboard for land. And if you think about it, surfboard for land, like that's 3 words. And I don't care what you're thinking, you're all thinking something different, but you're all thinking something similar. As opposed to the Segway is not a bike, it's not a golf cart, it's not a skateboard, and here we are like Beavertails. It's not so many things.
Yeah.
But now by the time you have to explain to your client, by the way, we're not this or this or this or this or that, well, you know what? The client needs a meme. They need just something quick and effortless to follow.
Yeah.
If they don't have that, they're on to the next thing. And in a funny way, two additional stories. On the one hand, I wonder if Beavertails was launched today, how much harder it would be in a world of memes where we're not sure how much time we'd have to be able to explain what we are.
Yeah. With short attention spans, yeah.
Yeah. But now, that said, in the U.S., So we are not academic. We are not overly intellectual, but we do look at the data. I don't want anybody to think that we do this off the, on the fly, off the seat of our pants. We do look at the data a lot. And the data is not always numerical. The data often is intangible. And so for us, when life is normal and not in COVID, the first thing we do every morning is actually review the feed we have a software that gives us all the back end feed for all of our stores. So if Ella goes to our store in Victoria and leaves a Yelp comment, or Zexi goes to our store in Niagara Falls and leaves a Google comment, we get it all consolidated onto one feed. And it's amazing what we do get out of that feed and the content we get out of that feed. And one of the things we discovered, totally kind of randomly, was that Americans kept referring to our product as a flat donut. And as
Wow.
like, that's pretty simple. And if you want to be principled, it could be insulting, which some of our franchisees think that is insulting. But we kind of looked at this about 2 years ago and said, whoa, hold on. That could be our segue moment. Like this could be the way to explain to America that doesn't have Beavertails, or not as much as Canada does. We only have 12 stores there. But this could be our way of saying to them, it's like a flat donut. And sometimes all it takes is that context for people to say, oh, wow, I've never had a flat donut. I wonder what that tastes like. And then you have a trial opportunity.
It's really.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Okay.
No,
It's just really interesting how you bring up like that entire idea about like having to explain your product to the people. And well, for Beavertails actually, if you had to explain it like to Canadians, what would be like the 3 words you would use?
To a Canadian.
Yeah.
Where have you been? That's 4 words. No, okay. Well, in Canada, we go with the official marketing, which is it's a whole wheat pastry shaped like a beaver tail, served piping hot with your choice of toppings.
Right.
Okay.
Outside of Canada, we're a flat donut with no hole. And we put like primarily actually all sweet toppings that are decadent on top. And it's warm and sweet. So it's kind of...
Okay. Yeah. It's funny you say that because we have not had to explain this to Canadians in a long time.
Yeah.
In Canada, it's more, so we have this one question, not to give away secrets, but the most important question on the franchise application process we have, and this is a long, complicated process, but the inside scoop, if you will, the most important question we ask is, where do you know Beavertails from? And you have to be a fan. So if you say, I've never had it, I just heard it was a good business investment, which, by the way, people say that. Not the right answer. You don't get fast track.
Yeah.
But the poetic answers we get are, they're literally entertaining.
Yeah.
Probably the all-time winner was this woman from Vancouver who wrote probably 2 paragraphs. Oh, I still remember the day when I reached the top of Grass Mountain and glistening in the sunlight was the hut off in the distance, and I walked over and smelled the delicious aroma, and she just went on and on and on. And then in talking with this person, we realized this was not scripted. Like, this is literally the way she feels about our product. She never ended up doing a deal with us, but that's more the prototypical Canadian example is people revert back to, oh, I remember the first time I had a Beavertail, it was... And in fact, on our titles, on our business card and our footers, our email footers, we always put a picture of ourselves as kids and chocolate on our mouth, or of our kids. So in our case, we have our kids on the picture. And we don't have titles. We literally have our favorite Beavertail and the year we first tried it in.
Yeah, so it may not correspond to the year you started working for us, but it's like an established date.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was going to say something before that you...
Oh, yeah, sorry about that.
No, it was something that Pino just said, too, that I wanted to pick up on, and I lost what I was going to say. Anyways, doesn't matter. I was going to say was it's interesting in terms of listening. And it's amazing that when you listen to your clients and when you're trying to focus and figure out what you're doing, there's a fine line between diluting your goal and your objective, and listening. And when we actually stood back and we started looking at those reviews, because we had that software ability and we didn't have it before, it led to so many things. It led to the flat donut realization, which was amazing for us. It led to customers saying, I'd like a place to sit down in your stores. I'd like a place that I can get a glass of water easily or rinse my hands because the product is sticky. And we had always designed stores where they were counters or walk-ups, which in this COVID period is actually super beneficial to us. Thank God we're not full service. But it's amazing how you learn, and it's amazing how you put those things into practice. And so, people tell me all the time, and not so much anymore, but back in the day was, I need a knife and fork and I need a plate. Why do you serve it to me on this like wax sheet of paper with napkins? And they was like, well, we're street food. And so there are certain things that you have to sort of keep that North Star, and there's certain things you need to listen to. And it's amazing how as you listen and you divide that creativity and you try and figure out what really is important and integral and the noise, and making sure that you listen to the things that are not shy to be listening to the clients. And, if you hear things over and over again, maybe there's a reason.
And okay, that reminds me of an interesting story from Burger King that I think you guys would enjoy. But I think Yesin or Abu, that you have both names there. So sorry.
Yeah, you can call me Abu, like the monkey in Aladdin. Pretty simple in there.
That wins. All right.
Never even thought of it.
Well, nice to meet you.
Same here.
So basically, I had a couple of questions. First of all, you were talking about clients, so I think that is a very important aspect of the business, and there are some like some evolving issues nowadays. Like we're more alert towards health, and I wanted to know, how are you guys adapting to this concern nowadays?
Wow, so many stories. Okay, so maybe I'm going to give an intro, and then maybe Tina could address that specifically. But
Sure.
This is I'm sure you've heard this anecdote before. It's a true story. Stephen Jobs was asked when they released, you guys are too young to remember, but the predecessor of the iPad was the iPod.
I actually do remember.
All right. That's IPOD if you want to Google that. Okay. So
I'll do my research.
Right. So when they first released that, somebody said to Stephen Jobs, wow, this is like revolutionary. How much research did you guys do to figure out that this thing should be invented? And he said something famous for two reasons. He said, we actually did no research. We did no research because the day before I show you an iPod, you have no idea you need an iPod. So how are you supposed to do the research? So listening to clients is fundamental. Nobody's going to tell you otherwise. But sometimes you have to have the boldness to go a step beyond the clients. So I said that was an astounding answer for two reasons. The first one is because of the sheer logic of his answer. But the second one is even more astounding. And that is that if we go past your parents and potentially to your grandparents, years and years ago, a company called Sony introduced a Walkman. It was a bright yellow cassette player. You guys are boned up on history. That's good. All right. When the chairman of Sony was asked 20 years before Stephen Jobs was asked that question, how much research did you guys do before you released the Walkman? And lo and behold, history repeats itself. He answered exactly what Stephen Jobs would answer 20 years later. We did no research because until we invented this thing, did you really know you needed to have music while you jogged? And think about that, right? Like now, of course you're going to jog with music. Otherwise, you got to talk to people you meet on the street. It's so obvious now, but yet the same device, if you will, invented twice in 20 years, the same answer. So have the boldness and the curiosity to do things that people don't necessarily know they need yet. Okay, it's a bit contrarian, but I'm throwing that to you just literally to maybe make you curious, to go back to my first point. But why don't you talk about the health?
the funny thing is nobody needs a beaver tail. I say that every time, every day, all day long. Nobody needs a beaver tail. But everybody needs, everybody, I would think most people, unless you really have, you're really diehard, you always indulge. Everybody has a moment of guilt, of guilty pleasure, a moment, something they allow themselves to have. And repeatedly, through all of our market research, our talking to clients, everybody will say at some point, oh yeah, when I'm on vacation or I have a weekend off or I'm on leisure time, I throw caution to the wind. That's my guilty pleasure. A beaver tail is my pleasure. And so if we focus, if I think about that North Star in that story, if I come in, I dilute it and I say, and the funny thing is about a beaver tail, the dough is actually a whole wheat, cracked wheat dough. It always has been. And we actually do float cook it, so it's not submerged. We float cook it in canola oil, like a healthier oil. We do all the right things, okay? But we take that very simple beaver tail that has fewer calories than a Tim Hortons muffin, and we top it, okay? We top it with things that you didn't even think could go together that taste so amazing.
For sure.
I need this. So nobody needs a beaver tail, but everybody does. And what we do, and this is where the fun sort of comes into play, is that when you create a s'mores beaver tail or a white brownie chocolate, like a chocolate brownie with white chocolate chips on a beaver tail, and you drizzle it with warm chocolate, you need one. And so the health doesn't become part of it anymore. And if we were to turn that around and say, oh yeah, and we get this all the time, when are you going to come up with a gluten-free tail? And yes, there are health reasons for that, absolutely, for people who are intolerant and celiac. But if we dilute and go the way, then where is our North Star? So it becomes more complicated. And so we don't. So we started a smoothie company a million years ago called Muzu. And it was always made with fresh fruit, which eventually became fresh frozen fruit because the company was so big we couldn't supply it. And we were literally squeezing oranges and lemons in our stores, and we had people like their arm would vibrate from all the squeezing by the end of the day until we became large enough to have it manufactured. And that was kind of the yin and yang of our product, was this healthy smoothie with this beaver tail. And we still sell that smoothie. And it's still the yin and the yang. It's like, and so we leave it. We've always, it has its place in our company, but we don't sell Coke or Pepsi. So we play that good and bad, but it's not our North Star. And so everybody gets that moment to indulge. So.
And in fact, I'll add to that because I want to tell you guys the Burger King story. I think it again, just some weird stuff going on in the real world that it's good for you guys to know about. But I think a key word starts to be authenticity. And that's true for people in careers, especially people starting off in careers, but it's also true for brands. It's very true for brands. So authentically speaking, if McDonald's were to wake up one day and say, we want to do salads, which they did, that's not an authentic brand premise. And McDonald's had a hard time doing their salads because that's not what they stood for. But if you look at other companies that have, Sweet Green is a big American company that does salads really well. It's like the Chipotle of salads. They do it really authentically. And I would suggest that they would have zero credibility releasing a burger.
Right.
So the authenticity for us, we are about the indulgence Tina mentioned. That said, when you look at seismic movements in the industry, it's weird. I know, we're all talking about healthy, but when you look at one of the biggest successes in the food industry, I'm not talking about specific brands, but I'm talking about just categories. Fried chicken, Chick-fil-A, amongst others, is seismic. It's massive to the point that there are shortages pre-COVID of the type of chicken you need to make that kind of a burger. I don't know if everybody's that concerned about health is a short of it, okay? Just based on that story. But the other one, because you also started off saying, listening to your clients. So we read this great story about Burger King, and this was about 7 or 10 years ago. But for all intents and purposes, The clients they had then were, the health trend trajectory was already started. And as much as we talk about health now, it was even more impactful to talk about it then. It was really starting, okay? So I know I only see video from a few of you, but just for humor me, if you will. They did a study of their core clients, the ad agency did. And ad agencies are usually creative, flaky people. And the franchisees of Burger King thought these guys had lost it. Okay, but from their study, the ad agency realized who their core client was and realized how many times per week they visited an average Burger King. Okay, so I'm not going to tell you who the core market is, but can anybody guess this core user? How often did they visit Burger King per week? Average.
I don't know. It depends. Like, it can really depend in the food industry, but maybe like some people could go like 2-3 times a day from like maybe 2-3 times a week, right? Like it really depends. Really depends. Now,
I'll
if you
just
tell me 2-3 times a year, I'll be way off.
I'll just guess every day, perhaps.
We have a 7 from Elspeth.
Yeah,
All
my
right.
guess,
Ella, go ahead.
I was at 7.
Oh, 7. Okay.
yeah, I
7.
wrote 7.
So in
I'll-
fact, yeah.
I just want to throw a number too. I'm gonna say like
Please.
5.
5.
5.
Steven,
Yeah.
you have a guess too? We see your your photo, but not your face. You want to type in an answer? Once a week. Wow, you guys are healthy. So a couple of crazy outcomes here, okay? Ad agency identified the core user of Burger King was a teenage boy. It was 14, well, a bit older than teenage too. It was 14 to 21, I think. Maybe 14 to 19. Whatever. Young boy. Average week visit, 17. This is their core user. Okay? Now here's where it gets, that part's interesting. Here's where it gets crazy. 17 visits a week, they realized in their studies, data is important, okay? They realized that the young lad, of course, not wanting to wake up earlier than necessary, the 17 visits comprised of lunches and dinners. So that's 14. How are we getting to 17? These young guys were not coming in for breakfast. So what were they doing? They were going skateboarding after dinner, staying out late. They were drunk or high, weren't driving. The last 3 visits tended to be on average, and it wasn't 3, it was more like 7 lunches, 5 dinners, and 5 nighttime. And Burger King released what they then called the fourth meal. It wasn't breakfast. Nobody has breakfast. Forget that. It wasn't lunch and it wasn't dinner. We got that covered. Here's the fourth meal. It's an 11 o'clock snack at night. And they packaged the fourth meal. All meal were packaged in handy containers. If you have a drink and the one hand, you can still skateboard. So far, interesting, crazy, but not the most amusing part. The most amusing part is that the franchisees of Burger King so did not understand or agree with any of this that they proceeded to sue the said advertising agency, saying you have a poor grasp of what it is that we do, and you're encouraging us to sell to these young guys who are actually loitering and causing havoc in our restaurants at night. We would rather not have them there. Okay, now, thankfully, that got righted and sales picked up so quickly. If you Google this, this was a major fast food success story. It rebounded so quickly that the lawsuit was never really materialized or never went anywhere. And the ad agency, which was one of the big ones, I think it was Foot Cone Belding, which is a really innovative U.S. agency, became celebrated for doing 2 things. Number one is looking at the data and boldly predicting what no one else was seeing. Sounds like the Walkman and the iPod, right? It took boldness to say, this could be a thing. And then for tying it together in a campaign that spoke to the target market, gave a product really suited for that target market, and celebrated a subculture around that target market. And it put Burger King on the map. It really, really did a lot for their sales and for their share price at the time. So not the kind of stories you usually read, but
Real life,
big money, but more importantly, so this is where, we get a kick out of this stuff.
Yeah, I'm going to tell a story.
When you think of yourselves a long time from now, you're sitting on a beach with your grandchild. I don't want to know that I made $1 billion in the car industry. I'd rather tell my grandkid that I developed the fourth meal for drunk kids on a skateboard. I'll leave that part out, but that's a better story to tell your grandkids.
There is, it's really interesting how, we could, like people, our franchisees have always said, we need more food. Can we do sandwiches? Can we do salads? Can we serve pizza? Can we just sell fries? How about just a hot dog? All very lame and very boring. And when you think of Beavertails, not really like top of mind, right? And so a couple of years ago, we after being sort of harassed, we had this realization, which is kind of a funny, you would think maybe potentially obvious, but Beavertails is the name on the door, and it's the prime product that we sell.
And it's the shape of the product too.
And it's the shape of the product. And we said, if a Beavertail is not the pivotal or an ingredient of the item, we don't bring it in. So when we talk about North Star and clarity, that's how it all starts, right? Is what are you trying to do? And so we had a shift in our menus last year, and we did something which drove our franchisees mental. They did not like it at all. They were like, what are you trying to do? We said, we sell ice cream in our stores, and we make our own ice cream, and it's fresh, and it's delicious, and it's amazing. But we've never really tied the two together. And it's kind of been a strange, like, off-menu thing that I think our staff do more than anything else was a scoop of ice cream on a Beavertail. They fold it over, they eat it in the stock room, like and hidden in the back room kind of thing. But it's delicious. And so on the menu, we put it in two places. And we said, add a scoop of ice cream, any ice cream, to your tail for $3. So franchisees were like, this doesn't work, my flow doesn't work, all these things don't work. And so I said, give it a summer.
And they also said, it's messy. The client's not going to want it on their Beavertail because it's going to melt.
Right. I said, give it a summer. Give it the peak summer season. Let's see how it goes. I spoke to one store just like September, and I said, can you give me an idea of how you're feeling about the scoop of ice cream on a Beavertail? And they said, well, to date, since we brought this product out in the end of May, we sold 5,000 scoops of ice cream on a Beavertail. So what's interesting with that is that we took something that we were already doing in two formats, joined them together. We're still selling ice cream. We're still selling Beavertails, but now actually we're elevating the price. So now you're getting two things, and you're bringing something together that people didn't realize that they needed or wanted. And so it's really interesting how the creativity and the elevating of the brand comes from all of those things. Unfortunately for COVID, or for us, we were about to launch into something called what we're calling internally ice cream parlor, where we're actually taking like a banana split, but making it on your Beavertail. So you get it served like in a banana split boat, and you have all the toppings, but on your Beavertail. So it's amazing how you can do stuff. And I see your faces, like you're all like, oh yeah, and it makes sense, strangely, right? But we've never done it. And when you start realizing how strong your North Star is and how important and what your client is looking for, even the most healthy people, they will indulge and they will share and they will say, let's get that. So we're still being true to who we are, and we're still allowing that sort of that Burger King philosophy, whereas, you don't need it. Those kids don't need 17 times a week, right? But at the end of the day, it's creating a need for something that you don't need. Nobody needs the $5 Starbucks coffee.
Seven,
sorry, but you need it.
It went up a few times.
Right. But it's all very interesting.
Yeah, that is definitely so true, and it's true also that like um, people who like actually change industries, they don't actually follow the needs, but they actually create ones, like new
Yeah.
ones, and that's something that you did, and that's inspiring. And I got so much value today from all your stories. Honestly, it's very inspiring.
Most of them are
Uh,
true.
yeah, yeah, they're
Well,
all
you got to
true.
figure out which ones are.
Okay, sounds good, sounds good. I'll go research on the iPod still, so like I don't know what it is, right? But but I have another question, and it's also concerning. I want to know a story of one of your stories, which is what made you go from the traditional restaurant business to actually going towards the franchisee business?
Oh, well, we were franchisees.
Yeah,
Oh,
we started off as
okay,
franchisees.
okay, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Interesting, interesting.
But
And
generally, kind of a mechanical answer for you, Abu, and good for, people understand what franchising is, but they don't always get why you do it. So
mhm,
if you have a clothing store like H&M or The Gap or J. Crew before yesterday or whatever, generally those guys don't franchise
mhm,
because if I deliver 1,000 red sweaters to 1,000 stores, chances are nobody's going to screw up the red sweater. When any of you walk into any of my 1,000 stores and buy the red sweater, it will be the same red sweater experience in all
mhm,
1,000 stores because the sweater is already made. Food is more complicated because if I send you into 1,000 McDonald's, to use the extreme, and you order 1,000 Big Macs and we break down those Big Macs today, you will see small variations. And McDonald's has their
mhm,
system down really well. But there'll be a little bit less salad, a little bit more, or a little bit less lettuce, a little bit more sauce, a little bit toastier bun. The
mhm.
variables make it tricky.
Or even
And
all the countries. Like there are so many countries, so many variations in every country, in every McDonald's, in every country also.
that's
Yes.
right. That adds
Mhm,
more complexity.
mhm,
And the cost to build, okay, the Gap is like a big store, but the cost per square foot to build a restaurant is generally higher than other industries. So for those two reasons, franchising has worked because you need somebody to invest the money, not just the head office, but the local player invests the money. And number two, because you need that local player to monitor the quality of the product more than with other industries.
mhm,
So franchising is popular in food for those reasons.
mhm,
But because we're on this sort of this chat, I think what also should be said is that we talked about before doing what makes you happy in life
mhm,
and getting up in the morning and loving your work. We spent a lot of time, I guess 14 years-ish, owning and operating our own stores
Yeah.
as Beavertail franchisees. And we actually, in that time, we also owned a couple of Fritalor restaurants, which is a Belgian French fry chain.
mhm,
We had La Cremiere ice cream stores. We had a whole bunch of other things. We started our own company for Muzu, for the smoothies and frozen
Yeah.
yogurt. We've done so many things. And what we realized along that journey was that we don't necessarily enjoy working in the stores. We don't necessarily enjoy that we run an office all day and then the peak for our stores are nights and weekends.
Mm-hmm.
So that means it's a 24-hour life. And so it's really important to recognize what makes you happy and what makes you tick. And at a certain point, if you become uninspired by one portion, you need to evolve it. And so we were able to evolve it, and we actually sold our stores to other franchisees who were able to run those stores really well and efficiently, and we could focus on the head office side, which was where the real storytelling and the real churning and the real day-to-day was happening without sort of burning both ends of the candle and still having fun doing it. So I think that those are important lessons, again, that you don't necessarily hear about in school,
Mm.
right?
mhm.
Those are the things that like make you tick on a day to day. And I think that they have a lot of power, and you have to think about all of those things as you set up your lives and your careers and the things that you're
Yeah.
after.
Which is closer than you guys realize.
Yeah.
For sure, for sure. There are many people that say that like when you find your dream work, it feels like you're not actually working.
That's right.
Yeah.
So
So
so I
true.
guess yeah, that is true, and I guess you guys found it like at many moments of your life. And I also
Yeah.
like the aspect of evolving because human beings, we constantly evolve, right? And like we aspire for new things every few years. And especially as entrepreneurs, like I think that is very we're gonna change. Like especially like me, I'm 20 years old right now. In 10 years, I'm gonna be 30, and maybe I'm gonna have kids. I'm going to have less time for myself. So like we're gonna live completely different lives and have completely different like mentalities for sure. And that's a very important aspect that you brought. Thank you so much.
Cool.
Our pleasure.
All right, so I think other people have questions, so I'll just mute myself, and if I have any others, I'll come back at you.
Okay. Yeah, I think
Thank you.
Ella, if you write your name, that means you want to say something.
Yeah.
I'm figuring this out.
I beg your pardon?
I'm figuring this out.
Perfect.
I'm late to the party, but I'm here.
I was just wondering, since you're an international brand, how does your North Star, or does it even differ depending on which global market you're entering? Because I know you have businesses, you said you had a store in the UAE and in the States, obviously. So do you change your product line depending on where you're going?
That's a marketing question.
Such a good question. So years ago, we used to, like 10 years ago, we would allow sort of the local flair to be injected. And we had a lot of failures. And people would say, oh, you don't know the culture. You don't know. And it's interesting. We don't know the culture. Like we don't. But what we do know is the world is flat, a bit like our donuts. And so what we were trying to explain to people as they came on board was that the water park is a really successful place for a Beavertail to be. The mall in the food court is not a successful place. Learn from our mistakes. Learn from where we came. They realized, oh yeah, it's true. I make more money in the water park than I do at the mall. Oh, I closed that mall location, but my water park is still doing well. And so it isn't so culturally different. Is that it's amazing how strangely flat we are. And so we really do try to not change for other countries, and it is working.
I really think that's amazing because you look at companies like Subways and McDonald's and they have completely different product lines for all of the different markets they're in. So I think consistency is such a great thing to have, especially when you're like looking at globalization. So that's really cool.
Thanks. Somebody else has it.
Lexi,
you have a question?
Yeah, that's right. So on the topic of marketing, Tina, sorry, Ms. Serayo.
No, Tina.
Sorry, Tina. Okay, all right. Yeah. So you have like a pretty special title. I think that's not really often. That's not really known. I think like creative director. Would you mind explaining a bit like what kind of tasks you do? What the typical day looks like for you?
I tell everybody I have the best job in the whole world.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because creative direction is it's an understanding for, I guess, for business, but not necessarily, and for management, but it's a blending of creative and management together. And so when we talk about, I keep saying storytelling, when we talk about what does a brand stand for, there's a story. And whether you know all the intricate parts of the story as a client is not necessarily always required. But when you walk into one of our stores, it gives you a feel. When you taste our product, it gives you a feel. When you see a post on Instagram, it gives you a vibe. When you enter our office or the way we answer our phone, all of our packaging, that's kind of all brand tone and storytelling. And so I oversee all of that. So from the way our stores, the decor in our stores and how it works, to what our staff wears as a uniform, is basically comes from my department, because it all leads back to what does Beavertail stand for. And so it's kind of the melding of business and creativity together.
Okay, and is it also you that designed the Beavertails, like the flavors, or is it really like a thing that you all do as a team?
Well, we all taste.
You all taste, yeah.
it
The
does
fun
come
part.
from that department, though.
Yeah, it does come from
Yeah.
us.
Okay.
And sometimes to the chagrin of our franchisees, we do push the limits. We've asked them to, torch marshmallows to make s'more Beavertails and do all kinds of things. But we have to sort of stay fresh and relevant. And everybody says, like, do you watch all like the food trends? It's amazing how we really do try and watch the food trends, but we watch what's trending in the world. And everything is kind of strangely intertwined and not independent. So we do the food side. We do the
and back to the authenticity thing. It's interesting because if you look at a company like Tim Hortons, where efficiency is so important and they're doing such crazy volumes, literally every step in their kitchen is measured. So if they release a new product, it has to, listen, we're in the food industry, everything has to taste good.
Yeah.
But the number one concern is how will that lay into our efficiency planograms in our kitchen? We go the opposite way. We look at how will this taste over the top delicious? And then we force it into the operations. Where at Tim Hortons, they fit it into the operations and then they force the marketing to support it. It's just the opposite approach.
Yeah, I'll give you a really great prime example of that. In the spring, pre-COVID, we launched in conjunction with General Mills cereal Beavertails. So we did Trix, Lucky Charms, and Chipped, which is like their little chocolate chip cookies, and we put them as a topping on our tails. The prime focus for that was, is it Instagrammable? Is it something that people would take a picture of when they purchase? Yes, it must absolutely taste good. But are we creating something that creates a three-dimensional vibe? It's something you taste, it's something you see with your eyes, and something that you share. And so if we can get that three-dimensional vibe from our products, then that helps us be authentic to who we are. Then yes, we do stuff like that. I wouldn't necessarily do that. I wouldn't do that with a salty or a savory product, other than our poutail, which is basically our poutine on a beaver tail. But it has to have those three dimensions.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. I think we might just have time for like one or two last questions, since our session is unfortunately approaching to its end. But I think Abu has a question, so you can go ahead. But thank you.
Yeah. So basically, I actually looked at the curriculum of Mr. Pino very fast. We talked a bit about Tina. Now I want to go a bit more towards Pino. So basically, I saw that you did the McGill MBA, and I wanted to know, like, how did it serve you? I know it changed a lot, like in 20 years, 30 years actually. But how did it serve you in your career?
So, okay, that's it's like you read my notes here. Wow. So I did have one other point that I wanted to make that fits really well with that comment. So before I said that curiosity is the most important value that we have. If curiosity is a value, there's a trait that I also want to highlight that I think is very important. And I have an article that, Ella, I'll count on you to bug me after. If you guys want the article, I'll dig it up. There's a recent article from the Harvard Business Review, and it says how intelligence and knowledge is okay if you're building, again, a bridge, or if you're doing a high surgery. But the most important trait for success is perseverance. And so, Abu, to answer the question, I had a very good time at McGill, and I still respect the program enormously. And I go and give presentations there often. But there's a joke with MBAs that if you want to kill a project, just put enough MBAs on it, because it's analysis by paralysis. And my twin brother also did his MBA at McGill with me. So we often joke to ourselves, we will literally analyze a project to death. It's true. There's a proof, she'll tell you. So to the degree that you have to persevere to get into these programs, they're very competitive, they're hard to get into, and you have to really work hard while you're in the program, that is valuable. But to the degree that it puts you even more in blinders, so we talked early in the talk about, or in this conversation about how schools are silos, and we don't do group interconnectedness as much as we should. Well, any master's degree, and an MBA is not an exception, any master's degree is just a refinement of those blinders. and a progression of that tunnelization, if you will. So I really try and caution against that. I've had a few employees over the years ask me, should I do an MBA? And depending on the individual, unless you're really academically minded or motivated, I don't know. There's a lot to be said about, I'm going to go live in Thailand or Australia for 6 months. You risk learning a lot more from that. That's a gross simplification that I don't mean to just lob at you guys, but it's the kind of advice I would give my kids too.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, I've been reading some books, and a lot of them actually talk about the pros and cons of the MBAs. So yeah, I was just trying to know your opinion on it for sure. Thanks so much. Very appreciated.
And sorry, I'll add one more thing. The COVID story, the ending is far from written, but this will reshape your generation like World War II reshaped our parents' generation. This is, I think, bigger than we're all accepting at this time. And in a world that changes that much, on the one hand, I feel like an MBA is an old world tool for what potentially will be a new world fight. And secondly, I think that turmoil and change like pandemics tend to bring about, not that I have vast experience in pandemics, but the kind of change we're seeing also allows you to really break the rules and try different things. So now's the time to be bold. Now's the time to really try things out of left field.
For sure, for sure. Inspiring us some more, eh? Thank you so much.
Excellent.
All right, great. I think that'll conclude our session for today. So really, thank you, Mr. Pino and Tina. Yeah. Got you. Perfect. Thank you for today. It was really an interesting session because we don't have that kind of interaction usually with our speakers. So really, thank you for coming, and all your stories were really amazing, really inspiring, especially during such difficult times. I think it should have probably lightened up the day for the students. So thank you for being there.
Really our pleasure. And usually when we get to give these speeches, people say thank you for coming, and we say great to have come. But today we can say to you, thank you for coming as well, because we didn't really come to you anyways. So there you go.
Yeah, of course. It was our pleasure. It was our pleasure.
Survive this, and have some sanity at the end of it.
Yeah. This is a time of opportunity. It may not seem that way, but be brave and have fun with it.